was he doing in a place where there were kids?
He hasn't been convicted yet.
Oh, okay.
Well, and he could be a sex offender and not a pedophile.
Well, that's true.
And he wasn't convicted yet, so
That
he had
was the
every
big
right to
thing.
be wherever he wanted, or could be.
So, I mean, I'm not sure why there's any concern about this particular foster parent and these parents. But she just told me that the social worker wanted to keep her confidential, and I don't know why, but I'm sure foster parents have run into biological parents. And
Helena's not that big.
yeah, I've never heard of any problems like that.
Plus
So,
with that open adoption, doesn't that affect it, doesn't, you know, work hand in hand with foster care?
yeah, I mean, if the foster parents end up adopting the child and there's an open
Yeah.
adoption, they would continue to have some contact.
Do they have to do that?
Do an open adoption? No. Uh-uh.
The other day, Carolyn, I shared this story with a couple of these guys. Where I live in a complex, you know, a four-apartment duplex, and across the alley, there's a lot of drama around where I live in the neighborhood, by Kmart.
Oh,
And these two little kids, they come up, their little house is in the alleyway, but they come over in our apartments where the yards are, the grass, and they play. And I was sitting out there one day, and the boy and the girl, they must be maybe 9 or 10 and 6 and 7, the boy and the girl. And they were coming up my stairs to see my puppy, and they were saying, "We need to go see our foster parents today." And I said, "Oh, really?" I mean, it's amazing that if you just sit there and they feel safe around you, it just blew me away. They're saying, "Yeah, we've been with our dad, but we miss our foster parents, and he's going to let us go see them today."
how nice.
And they were all excited because they had that plan to go see them. And then they said to me, "Yeah, my mom relinquished her rights." And I just was like, "Okay, what do I do?" And I said, you know, it's like they're offering this to me, and I wanted to just hug them. And I thought, God, what do you say?
Sounds like they were pretty okay
Happy,
with
yeah.
what was going on.
Yeah.
They knew.
Yeah. It's just,
I know those kids,
You think you know them?
and I know you know them.
Well, some kids get real attached to their foster parents,
Yeah.
and they maintain a relationship for forever.
and that was all they were looking forward to.
We've talked a little bit, or I've mentioned about this bridging the gap, this kind of a new thing that's going on with the department, where right from the get-go, they're introducing foster parent and bio parent,
Right.
and developing kind of a working thing, where they, you know, both sides are working on behalf of the child, and the foster parents become a support person for the bio parents. So I think that's where some of this discussion is coming from.
And we just had a case that the kids went back to their parent, their mother, and it was that kind of case that the foster mother and the families have worked together all along, and it has been really successful. So, anyway, so I was just gonna, Montana hasn't really given a clear indication as to what role the attorney does have in cases where the kids can't really tell you what they want, or where they're too young to tell you what they want, and there's kind of a mix of ways that this goes across the country. In some states, the statutes say that the attorney has to work on the expressed desire of the child, meaning what they want is what you stick with, and you stick with it no matter what kind of silly or difficult or inappropriate kind of placement or services or whatever that the kid wants. And the only time I as an attorney really get an out for that under this express desire model of representation is if the child is asking you to advocate for them to be in a really dangerous situation or a really harmful situation, and then the legal standards people suggest in those situations when you're advocating a really not so good position for a child, that's when you should make sure that there's a CASA person or a guardian ad litem who can come in and say, we understand that's what the kid wants, but that is not in this child's best interest. So some of the other states relax that standard a little bit and indicate that as the attorney you can consider what the best interests of the child are. You're still obligated to present what their wishes are, but you have more of an ability to kind of look at all the circumstances and try to work with your client in coming up with a reasonable solution to a case. And as I said, Montana hasn't been real specific about what the role of the attorney is supposed to be, whether I'm supposed to be a total advocate for my client or whether I can also consider, at least to some degree, what is the best thing for my client, which maybe I don't know what's the best thing for my client. What I've found from working with most of the kids is they've got a pretty good sense of what they need and what they want. I had one 16-year-old boy, actually, he's still my client, and when I first met him, man, he had this grand plan. He was going to go to California, he was going to leave his home, leave high school. Boy, he was going to be in a rock band, and I mean, that's what he wanted. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, right. No judge is going to send you off to California at 16. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to be a little bit creative here and try to talk some sense with this kid. And the next time I met him, he was back on his medication. And he wasn't quite so manic. And it was a little easier to talk to him about reality at that point. So sometimes, you know, kids come up with these crazy ideas, but normally if you kind of talk them through it and talk about what the dangers or the perils may be if we go with what you're really talking about, I think for the most part, most of them can kind of, they're not stupid. They know what they need, and that's kind of where they're headed. So, but one of the other things that I do as the attorney is talk to the kids about the whole court process and whether or not they want to come to court. Kids are entitled to come to any of the court hearings that they want to come to. And some of the older kids want to come, some of them just to see what goes on, but some of them actually want to talk, and many of them will tell me, I want to talk to the judge, and then when we get into the courtroom they say, no, you talk to the judge for me. But it's their right to do it, and they need to have that right. They need to know that they have the ability to tell the judge what they're thinking and what they want. I mean, so many decisions are made in their absence and without their input, and it's scary, man, when these kids go into foster care and they don't see their parents, and their parents are off at treatment or their parents are in prison, and the kids don't know what's going on. It's pretty scary for them, and it's pretty hard on them. And I think they have this view of the court system, which probably many people do who aren't actually involved in it. And I think sometimes for them to actually come and see the judge and meet the judge, and the judges here are wonderful. we are so lucky in this county. They are so attuned to kids, and they're so attuned to what's good for kids and what's safe and healthy for kids, and they treat them so well when they're in the courtroom. And I think it's good for kids to get to see that if they want to know that that the judge cares about them and is willing to listen to them. And I think that gives them feeling of maybe having a little more power in a really powerless situation.
Yeah, you know, I listened to a panel of kids, foster kids that most of them were like 17, 18 years old, and talked about their life as a foster kid. And that's one of the things that, you know, they were saying unanimously that what hurt them as much as anything was not being included in these decisions.
So if a kid wants to talk to the judge, he can talk to the judge?
Yes.
If the child does go ahead to speak to the judge, is it just relatively conversational between the judge and the child?
Is there an age limit?
No.
They can't? Sweet.
Do kids with incarcerated parents sometimes visit them at the prison, or is that?
Sometimes. It kind of depends on the situation. When I was at the county attorney's office, oftentimes a parent would be in jail and they were getting shipped off to prison, and I would see if I could finagle a visit in a jury room or something so that dad could come over from the jail and see the child to at least say goodbye to them and talk to them or whatever. And sometimes the parent would have just signed off their parental rights in the jail and off they're going, and they need to see their child before they go and say goodbye to them.
What do you think about kids seeing parents in jail?
I don't like it.
Forget that.
I really don't like it. I just think it would be awful scary for a kid to see their dad dressed in an orange suit and.
But if the option is they don't get to see the parents at all, you know. I've often struggled with that, you know, and it would sure be nice if there was some accommodation made where kids could see parents.
Yeah.
Incarcerated parents, not in that, you know, through the glass kind of a setting.
Whose call is it?
Whoever's willing to make the arrangements, I think, because the people at the jail are very reluctant to do stuff like that. I don't know how they are at the prison, but it takes some. I mean, I used to just go over there and beg somebody from the jail to please bring mom or dad over to the jury room just for an hour. Just sit there for an hour with them so they can say goodbye to their children. But it's not easy to get it arranged, and I mean, I guess it should be whether the child wants to see their parent in that situation.
Well, if it's a county situation, why can't you talk to the county sheriff and set up arrangements?
That's who we talked to.
Oh, and it didn't work?
I mean, it means they need more staff because they can't just send the prisoner over to sit in the
Right,
room in the
exactly.
courthouse.
They have
Somebody's got to
someone
be
come
over
in.
there with them, and it's a hassle that they're not used to. I mean, they'll do it, but
If they had a bigger, newer jail, would there be a possibility
a visiting room.
of a suitable room for visitation within the jail proper, where they
Maybe.
might not have to have extra staff?
I know when I went to Townsend to see the mother in my CASA case, the first time I went over there, we had to talk through the glass. After that, I just went right in with her and we just sat in there together. It was no big deal. So it kind of just depends on the situation.
The situation being people in control.
Yeah, yeah. So, Another thing about me as the attorney for a child, when I meet them, I try to explain who I am and what I do, and most of them just have no idea what I'm talking about. It's not that easy to explain to them what attorneys do and what the whole court system's about and all that, but I try to do it as best I can. But one of the things I tell them is that anything they tell me is confidential, and I cannot repeat it unless they give me permission to repeat it. So if they have information that they want to talk to me about, they can do that and know that I will not betray them. That's an ethical thing with an attorney, and I, unlike you, I'm not a mandatory reporter. I mean, the statutes make you all mandatory reporters if you know about some abuse or neglect going on. But if some kid tells me that somebody's abusing him, I am not a mandatory reporter, and if that child doesn't want me to tell, I don't tell. I would certainly try to get that information out in some fashion, but...
No, I'm gonna, I would think it would depend on what was happening.
Absolutely.
Because as I understand it, your role as an officer of the court, if it's actually illegal, you're duty bound to report it.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. If a kid told me he was going to go out and murder his grandmother tomorrow, I have to report that. Because it's a crime. And you know, kids aren't going to report to me that dad's abusing them and not tell anybody else. That's pretty unrealistic. But I mean, I want them to know that they can talk to me about things, and I won't rat them out if they don't want me to.
What about sexual molestation?
If they're victims, well, I'm certainly going to try to get them to tell somebody. And if they were in a situation in a home where it was happening, I would make sure that they got out of there. But if there was something about that they didn't want me to say, I wouldn't do it.
But it's not illegal?
Yeah, but the kid's not doing it. The kid's not committing a crime.
But they're a victim.
They're a victim.
Oh, okay.
So
I mean, that's a pretty far-fetched example.
Yeah, pretty fine line, too.
Yeah, but I mean, I haven't seen anything like that happen, but, I mean, I can see a kid saying, don't tell my mother how much I hate her boyfriend, or something like that. That would be more likely, I think. So, I often, as the attorney, try to initially meet the kids with the CASA. That works out really well for me, and I don't know how it works out for you when you get a case, but it seems like these kids get just blasted with so many people and so much stuff when these cases start, and I kind of feel like if I can hitch a ride with somebody else and go meet the kids at the same time, maybe it makes it a little less overwhelming to have yet another person making an appointment with them. So, and that's worked out pretty well for me. I've had one client in Butte for, he isn't there now, but for a year he was there, and the CASA and I just drove over to Butte together to see him, and hung out with him together, and it worked out well, and it was fun. So we had.
How old was the kid?
10. So sometimes that's helpful, and possibly from your perspective, it might, if the child is asking you questions about what's going to happen and what the legal mess is, you know, if I'm along with you, maybe I can answer some of that child's questions too.
How many counties do you cover?
I'm sorry?
How many counties do you cover?
this county, and I've been to Boulder for just one case, and I think Marr County too, but there haven't been any cases, is that right?
Just
Well,
recently.
I got 2 filed up there now.
Oh, well, somebody else must have them. Helen must have them.
Yeah, I don't know, I actually contacted the judge to see if he put me on
Where's Mark on?
White
White
Sulphur
Sulphur.
Springs.
And Broadwater, do you do, oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
us,
Yeah,
No.
I've never had a case in Broadwater County. I assume Helen gets those. She's closer
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
So, and one of the other things about you folks is you probably have more time than I do to talk to more people and hopefully give me some information that I can find helpful to convey to the court. I was talking to the CASA yesterday in this case that's going to court tomorrow, and the CASA's a nurse, and she had a whole different perspective and information that she could give me that I didn't have any idea about, just because that was where she was coming from in the case, and that was helpful to me. So the more people you talk to and the more people you interact with, I think the better feel you get for a case and the better job you can do for the kid.
So the CASA just verbally shared that information, there isn't a report or anything that she
Right.
gives you? Okay.
Right.
And so, originally you'd said that, you know, if the parents had an attorney that you can't talk to them, but could we give you that information?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and there's no conflict there.
No.
Okay. And you could use that information?
Well, to some extent.
Okay.
It depends on what kind of information
Right,
it
right.
is,
Okay.
but I mean, they're not going to tell you things that are. For instance, hi Loretta.
Hi, Carolyn.
The CASA told me yesterday just some medical information that I didn't have about the mother's medical condition. And, I mean, it wasn't that it's not information that I couldn't get somehow, but she was just able to get it right from the horse's mouth, and I wasn't able to do that. So she can give me a lot of information that's helpful.
And is there any information you can't give you?
I mean, I can't.
I think that would relate right back to our own rules of confidentiality that we've been through. You know, that anything that we give, I'd work right down through the matrix that Bill provided.
And I think if you as CASAs have some concerns that need to be taken up with the court, you can certainly talk to me, the attorney, about it, and I can see if there's something I can do as far as the court goes if you have a concern that needs to be addressed through the court.
Without breaching confidentiality.
Yeah, we can always call Bill.
Yeah, call
Yeah. You could be on call a lot.
Yes.
Call Bill.
And we'll have a mentor.
That's right, we'll have an
I think that's about all I have, but if you have questions or anything you want to talk about, Bill.
As far as communicating with the judge, would you kind of explain that? Like, we can't go talk to the judge about it?
Oh, and neither can I. I mean, I have to file something on paper and file it with the court and share it with the other parties to the action. And for instance, when I set up this mediation, I had to file a motion with the court asking for mediation and putting in the document why I wanted to do that, and give notice to all the parties, and find out if everybody was agreeable to it. And typically I check with the parties before I file something like that to see if anybody's going to object to it, or see if it's going to be acceptable to everyone. But no, I can't go directly to the judge either. Have to do it through the legal channels of filing the paperwork. So, but I had a case a couple of years ago that as the department's attorney, I had to advocate their position in the case, and I was kind of wishy-washy about their position. And the attorney for the kids got together with the CASA, and they made a decision to ask the court to do something different. So the CASA, or the attorney and the CASA, got the paperwork together and they filed that, and so we had a court hearing that dealt with both the department's position and the position of the CASA and the attorney for the children, and they prevailed, which actually was a good thing. But that was an important situation for an attorney to be involved, because he was able to get the paperwork filed and find out from the CASA what the positions were and present that to the court. So that was a pretty effective way of dealing with that.
But we don't have the power, even through an attorney, to say we decide termination of rights is the way that this thing used to go, and the department's not there at all. We can't initiate or cause a filing to be made for termination or whatever the case may be, correct?
Correct. Though the statute does provide that the court can appoint an attorney for the cost, for the guardian ad litem. So I would think in that situation, you could ask the court to appoint an attorney for the CASA. And then file it that way through the attorney for the CASA.
Who would ask?
And I think that's what Ellen was just talking about, wasn't she?
Oh, well, in one jurisdiction they have an
Yep.
attorney appointed for the CASA in every case, as well as an attorney appointed for the child. So they've got guardian.
And I haven't quite figured that out yet. I mean, is the attorney for the CASA representing the CASA, or are they representing the child? I don't quite know how that one works, but.
Well, I could see how if you had older kids, and maybe you can tell me how often this happens, but because, you know, they can speak for themselves and their wants are gonna be maybe totally misaligned with what's in their best interest. So,
Sure.
So then, if your CASA and your attorney are just like, they have to be on two different places because of what the child wants, maybe they would get an attorney at that point? Is that why? Something like that?
I'm sorry.
Well, I was
Unless-
just saying that if she has an older child and his wants are totally different from what I think are in his best interests,
Right.
then an attorney may come in handy there. Is that why maybe they got an attorney appointed to them?
I don't, I could only remember one situation as a child that was at Every Mountain, and the child wanted to return to mom, and the department was okay with that, but we weren't on our side. But it so happened that the CASA that was appointed in that case was an attorney, and what happened is that I was then appointed, so that there were two appointments, and she acted as the attorney in that situation, and I became the CASA. And I remember, I think you were there, Carolyn. I remember Randy Hood saying. But
Well, and normally in your CASA report, you would at least allude to what the child wanted.
Oh, sure.
You know, this child wants to return to grandma who's a sex offender. I, as the CASA, don't think that's in the child's best interest. I mean, you're certainly flagging to the court that you have taken into account what the child wants, but you don't see that as an appropriate way to handle a case. So, I mean, I think the judges are pretty savvy. If I go in there advocating some position on behalf of a child that is not a good position at all. I mean, usually the judge can figure that one out.
So do you find that in the older kids that their wants are different than what's in their best interests?
They're not usually real divergent.
Yeah,
Kids are pretty smart.
they're very smart, yeah.
And a lot of them have been through a lot, and they kind of know the score. I think some of them are more interested in returning to a parent that we might not think is the best place for that child to be, but at least with older kids, you're not going to change what they want to do that much anyway. They'll end up back with that parent at some point, so sometimes there's not much you can do about that. If you have a 15 or 16 or 17-year-old kid, they're going to pretty much run the show. You put them somewhere they don't want to be, they'll run away. So, I mean, you kind of do have to take into account what they think and how much they're going to be willing to bend. And sometimes it takes a lot of talking from Loretta to make them see the light.
Other questions for Carolyn?
I just wondered if you brought any sandals, because after Tara talked to us, you know, a week and a half or whatever ago, pretty clearly that she thinks you can walk on water anywhere.
Me?
Yeah.
I think she can
great.
walk on water too.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know too many people who think that.
There's at least two of us.